Hello again, how are you? I hope you're doing okay. Thanks for joining me again, and this time I am back in the studio, as you can probably see, because I have decided to do something that I really should have done a long time ago, and that is to improve the way I scan and process my negatives and slides if I'm doing slides, but that's pretty rare. Those of you who followed me from the beginning of this channel will have seen when I swapped back to doing predominantly film photography, having been an almost entirely digital photographer for many years, I'd found that my slide scanner didn't work anymore. Ooh, that does not sound good, does it? The software that I had wasn't compatible with my modern computer. There were all sorts of other issues. If you want to watch the video, I'll link to it, obviously, and you can watch and see all the stuff there. I came up with new solutions. I started using foam, I used my phone, couldn't find any real good solution until I found this way of scanning using my DSLR camera. 31mm extension tube, 50mm lens, Canon 5D Mark II on a tripod pointing directly down, although it tended to shift slightly and that gave me out of focus portions, and facing this light box which I got very cheap off Amazon. And it wasn't designed for scanning slides, it was designed for tracing drawings on. It started developing yellow spots on it. I don't know if it was the negative being up against the white background and then the light coming through it and it burning through and staining or what, but I was getting horrible yellow portions on the scans that I was doing and I couldn't work out what that was for. I thought it was my film. Also, it wasn't completely flat, it started to bend, so couldn't hold the negative flat, and I didn't have a proper negative carrier. So using this, which I 3D printed, as a way to hold the negative against the light box. So it worked, but it was quite fiddly to hold on to, and there was the possibility that I would move it slightly. The maximum brightness of the light box wasn't really high enough to get the most out of the scan, so I was having to use a higher ISO on the camera and a wider aperture than I would have liked to have done. The way I'd set it up, I was getting a slight softness around the edges of the negative because of the characteristics of the lens. I kind of liked that vintage effect, and I told myself that this was the look that I was going to go for, and so I could keep it like that. But the last shoot that I did, which was going to Sheffield and shooting a running race, it didn't really work for it. The softness around the edges, etc, it just wasn't what I wanted. So I thought, okay, let's make a tiny investment. I'm not going to spend 600 quid and get a proper slide scanner, but what I will do is I'll spend 30 quid, 29.99 on Amazon, and get this. It might just make that little bit of extra difference to improve what I'm doing. It is a dedicated negative copying set, so it's got the little runner here to hold the negatives flat. I won't be having to hold them with the 3D printed thing myself. The light has, I think it's 9 levels of brightness or something, and it's small, it's more portable, gives you the colour temperature in Kelvin, and hopefully that is accurate, so I'll be able to set the camera to that and get a completely white balanced result. So I'm going to try this. I'll unbox it in a minute and we'll do some tests. But as well as improving the scanning, I'm also going to try and improve the processing, because that again is something that I just kind of Heath Robinson myself. I use Adobe Camera Raw, and initially I just flipped the image, inverted it. Then I started using the curves and shifting the curves to get the negative a little bit more sophisticated. And then I created a preset for particular film stocks, for Gold, for Ektar, for Ultramax, all the ones that I use most regularly, and of course black and white Ilford, HP5 and Kentmere. And yeah, it's all worked for me quite well, but I want to improve on that. I want to come up with a better recipe. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. And when I have completed that, I am going to show side by side an old scan, the original scan, because I've still got all those of pictures that I took this year, and new scans. So I'm going to pick out, say, 20. I've got, this is my little folder where I keep my negatives. So there you go, you can see I've got negatives, Halloween gorilla mask. I don't know if you remember that fantastic Halloween video where I went out in a gorilla mask. Yeah, so I'm going to pick out, say, 20 frames from the past year of the photographs that I like the most, and I will compare side by side the new scan, the old scan. You can Let me know which you think is best and I will try and explain what I think. I really hope it's worth the investment and the time, but we shall see. Sooner we get going, sooner we'll find out. So right, I'm going to unbox and crack on. There might be a slight pause while I readjust the camera and everything, because I'm actually going to use the camera that I'm filming on as my scanning camera in the future, because this one, big, clunky, I don't hold the mirror up so it makes a mirror clack. That's the Lumix and it is mirrorless, so I won't get the mirror slap. Also, different extension tube, different lens. I've given this a little test and I think it gives better edge-to-edge sharpness. It's a 40 to 150. I have it at 40 with a 10mm extension tube on. Should be good. Right, let's give it a go. So, our little silica gel, which we don't eat. Some quick start guide. Quite nicely packaged. There's a little slide mount holder. I've got a slide with me so I can try that out. Yeah, it seems quite sort of solid. It doesn't seem like it's bendy, which is good. Guessing, what's this? Cables. Not quite sure what these are, but I dare say we'll find out. Yeah, so that's the power cable. It's got obviously the higher, lower brightness and on off. Most important, the LED light itself. Excuse the mess, it's just always a tip here. There we go. JJC, not to be confused with JVC. Hoping there's a protective cover on there because there's like a spot. Yeah. Take off the protective cover. And yeah, that's a nice even matte white. Let's hope it stays like that when it's lit. And here, this is probably what's going to make the most difference, is a proper film holder, which should hold my negatives flat in a way that I couldn't do with the 3D printed one. There we go, negative holder, so I'm guessing it opens up on a hinge. Really should read instructions, shouldn't I, but life's too short. Yeah, there we go. And then pop the negatives in there, close it, slide it in. Good, all the bits are there. So, before I forget, this is the camera I'm going to be using, not with this lens, that's the lens that I use to film my intros. Going to have this at the 40 and it's got a 10mm extension tube on it. It's how I'm going to point it at this. It's got like a little stand, but is that actually the best way to do it, or should I have it completely flat like that? Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's see how we go. Got to plug it in something first. Right. So here I have a multi-way socket. I'm charging my phone on it, so I'll unplug that. Plug this in. Oh, well, it's glowing, so that's a good sign. Whoa, that's bright. Right, that's definitely a lot brighter than that was. That's good already, except I've temporarily blinded myself. Okay, so what are we going to do with this? Are we going to lay it flat on something, or are we going to put it on the top? And has it got something to do with these? They do seem to be. I have to look at the instructions for a moment, see if they actually do have some purpose. Ah, it's just you can mount it on a tripod. Yes, it has a tripod screw. That is nice. Right, okay. Is it the same size thread? It is. Good. Love it when things are standard. Perfect. Some of the ones actually attach to the barrel of the camera, so you know you've got it completely flat. This one evidently doesn't. One of those and a tripod for that. We're probably in business. Okay. And turn down the brightness as much as we can. Okay, that's the minimum brightness. Let's pick some negatives to scan to start with. We could start with the most recent round Sheffield run, because that's what actually spurred me on to do this. Right. There we go. Does it matter which way around it goes? Probably not. Yeah, they're lined up inside the grooves. And then I dare say we slide this in here. And it clicks into place on each one, so that's quite handy. Let's see. Yeah, it's back to front. There we go. Set our camera to manual mode. Get the ISO to the minimum ISO, which on this camera is 200. I was scanning on 400 on the other camera, so that is hopefully an improvement. And then I need to change the white balance. Get the shutter speed. Maybe go 40th a second, f10. Back to back sharpness. That should be good, then we need to focus it. We'll probably use the remote control to take the shots so I don't get any camera shake. Right, now the rest. Okay, so before we go into the next stage of the process, I thought it might be nice to just have a brief intermission and give you a break from me sitting talking to the camera. We'll get back into it very, very soon. But here, a little musical interlude. Okay, so we've got the negatives scanned. Now we need to get onto the computer, fire that up, and we can do the processing and see what results we get. Okay, so just before we start looking at this process, I made a slight change. I swapped lenses. I realised that with the 40 to 150 lens, I was losing a bit of resolution because at the magnification that the extension tube was giving, I was not able to fill the frame, and I wanted to fill the frame as much as possible. So I swapped to the 14 to 45 lens, which I could then fill the frame with. So the pictures that you're going to see, they were all scanned using the 14 to 45mm lens. Everything else is as you saw it in the last part of the video. So here is the first scan ready to be processed. I'm not going to use any of the actions that I've already created. So the first thing I do is in the curves, pick the red, flip it, pick the green, flip it, pick the blue and flip it. And we can see that that gives a very, very blue image, which is not what we want. So the blue channel obviously is not quite as it should be. Now what I could do is go in here and play with these until I got the correct result, but why not let the computer take the strain. We will go into colour, pick the eyedropper tool and click the edge here, and that sets the white balance correctly. Now we can zoom in, go to 100%. That is already looking a lot sharper than previous scans. Obviously the guy here isn't sharp, but that's because he's moving and the shutter speed isn't quite enough to freeze him. I don't want to add too much texture and clarity. I was having to do that because I needed to bring out the sharpness a bit, but if you put too much in, it exaggerates the grain. So I just pop a little bit in there, and then when we open it in Photoshop, it will be open at 16-bit, so we can make some more subtle changes. We'll play with the curves because it's a little bit too washed out. Just need to increase the contrast a little bit, and it's a little bit on the blue side. So we'll go into the colour balance, do this to taste. This is why when people talk about film looks and colour and the different characteristics of different films having different colours, it's not really that simple. The way the brightness of different colours is rendered by the chemistry of particular films and film bases does make a difference, but it's not really colour. You can change that. There's so many other variables, the lens that you both capture the frame on, that you scan the frame in, the colour science of the camera that you're using to do the scans or the scanner, and then all these tweaks that you can do in Photoshop. So film look is more complicated than just being a particular colour that a film has. You know, people talk about the rich browns or something of gold and so forth. It's not really that simple. It's a big topic, and I won't try and go into it in any detail here because it's just too big. But I think that looks like a nice image now. And so I will make it a still for the video, and you can see it at full size. So looking at it full size, I prefer actually the old one because of the colouring and the vignetting, but that is accidental and it's not what I would want in a lot of shots, and it's something that I would like to be able to maybe add myself rather than not be able to take it away. If you look at the two shots merged together, I've sort of created a composite where you can just see sections where it's clear how much sharper and how much more contrast there is in the new scans. I could definitely change the colour balance in the scans to a more pleasing tone for me. I like the sort of more purpley tones. I think it's too blue, but I think it's still much better the way it is. So that said, let's look back at some of the photo shoots I did over the last year and compare a couple of the images that I got. And I think a good place to start would be a trip to the Irwood Reservoir with Lomachrome Purple and Lucy. So in the original, you can see that there's not really enough dynamic range in the scan, and it's a bit posterized almost. Whereas the new scan with the new processing has rendered a great deal more detail in the middle of the image as well as at the edges, and the colours are more subtle. Now, in a way, I prefer the original because I like those punchy tones, but I could ramp that up in the new file and produce a similar result, or I could stick with the more natural, if you can get natural when you're using Lomachrome Purple, in the new scan. If we look at another couple of pictures taken with that roll of film, you can see similar things happening again. In this one of Lucy climbing over the stile, I actually really prefer the new one because although it is a bit more muted, a bit less obvious, it just seems a bit more polished. And certainly if I actually printed out this image at say 8x10, I'm sure it would look a great deal better with the new processing than the old. So this next shoot is right at the beginning when I noticed that there were problems with my scanning setup, not just softness, but staining, when I went to Coniston for a Lakeland Trails race. And here's what I had to say at the time. There seems to be an ugly brown stain right in the middle of the frame. Now, I don't know where that's come from. I don't think it's a light leak. So what I did was I put all the pictures back into Photoshop and I ran an action to replace that brown colour, shifting the hue slightly and lightening it up to make it less obvious. So you can see there's always a way to try and fix things, but it's never as good as getting it right to start with. And I think you can see that with this picture of the container home, where the original, the staining just makes it look a bit poor. And the rescanned and reprocessed image looks so much better even without any post-processing applied to it. And I'll be happy to spend some time dodging and burning and getting this looking really, really nice. Here's another one from that trip. And again, you can see the new version, I think, way superior to the old. So I'm really glad at this point that I got this new setup. Well worth the 30 quid and the extra time spent getting the processing in camera on Photoshop properly done. Okay, so time to address the, if not elephant in the room, the small badger in the room, which is that obviously this setup doesn't work for some of the film that I want to scan because it simply won't fit into the film holder. And it's not even that I could do it section by section because I'd have to cut the film up to do each section, and I'm certainly not going to do that. Equally, this shoot where I took panoramas in the Lake District, yeah, I suppose I could scan that bit section by section and then put those sections together without damaging the film, but it's a lot more work and it's not an ideal solution. So yeah, there are limitations to this setup. Also, on a side note, I've got used to scanning negatives where you are scanning the whole negative because the 3D printed device that I used is slightly oversized. Whereas when I'm using this new device, the very, very edges of the frame are hidden by the mask, which I think is normal, and that's what you get if you took it to a developer. But I'm used to getting things right at the edge. Sometimes there's a little detail that I actually want at the edge. You can see it's much better if you can see just what's at the edge there. But these are small gripes, and in general, I'm really, really happy with the results that I've got. Okay, so what do you think of the results? What do you think of the new setup? What could I have done differently? What could I improve on from here? I really like to hear your comments. Pop something down there. I always read them. I act on them as often as not. If it seems like a sensible suggestion, I will give it a go. That's it for this week. Please do subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps me out, makes it possible for me to carry on doing this. Like, share, all that business. And most importantly, enjoy whatever you're shooting. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very soon. Bye for now.